So I'm Alister Leggatt and I'm the Catchment and Biodiversity Manager for Affinity Water.
Alister, thanks for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series today. I can feel my feet sinking into mud through my wellies. Where are we?
Yes, we have picked a fantastic day for it. Well, we are on the outskirts of Stevenage in Hertfordshire in a little village called Aston, and we are just walking alongside the River Beane.
Now, the River Beane, tell me where it flows from to and why it's important in terms of Affinity Water catchment policies.
Right, so yes, the River Beane is part of the wider River Lee catchment, and the River Lee catchment forms part of the Thames River Basin. So the River Beane is a chalk stream that flows through Hertfordshire, so it flows just north of Stevenage and it flows down towards Hertford where it joins the River Lee down there.
And then onto the Thames, I believe.
And then down to the River Thames. Actually, the River Lee, for reference, actually flows right down through to where the Olympic Park was. So where some of the water events for London 2012 were actually held on the River Lee. So yes, that's a huge catchment area that really flows from South Cambridgeshire right down to, yes, the Thames estuary.
And of course, chalk streams, they're very rare. They've been likened to as rare as the Bengali tiger, 240 in the world, of which about 10%, 24, are in the Affinity Water catchment area.
Yes, I believe that about 90% of global chalk streams are in the UK, and yes, you're correct. A significant number of those make up the catchments that Affinity Water supply our drinking water from. So yes, Affinity's operations are very much intrinsically linked to our chalk stream catchments and the chalk stream environment.
Now, of course, that's where the push me, pull you policies come from, because we love to think of the meandering, slow-flowing chalk streams, but at the same time, we extract water from the chalk aquifers.
Yes, we do, yes. So about 65% of the total water we supply to approximately 3.5 million customers comes from chalk groundwater. The remaining water we abstract comes directly from the River Thames. So yes, we are hugely dependent on supplying a very large population of people in an economically key area of the UK.
And you mentioned that we're near Stevenage, but of course Stevenage, a new town celebrating a birthday, an important anniversary, but I believe was built to house 60,000 people. It's now up to 80,000 and then more than 100,000. So all those homes require a water supply.
Yes, I think you've described the classic challenge that we have in this region of the United Kingdom, where we have experienced enormous population growth, the growth of new towns such as Stevenage. We have that very heady mix of urban areas mixed with the rural landscape that we're surrounded by now. But as I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure many people see, there is development going up everywhere. We are estimating in our region, southeast of England, an extra 4 million people over the next 30 years, and those people have to be housed somewhere. They need drinking water on tap. Yes, all of this puts pressure on the environment where we're taking that most precious commodity from.
And Affinity Water has in 2021 and will continue in 2022 launching its Save Our Streams campaign, where they're making consumers aware of the need to save water in households, because the household consumption in the Affinity Water area is high compared to other parts of the UK. We've got new legislation which will now limit the amount that households can use in terms of their water. But 170,000 people signed up to Save Our Streams. We've had a significant improvement in the use of water in the region. Is that where the future policy directive lies, in educating consumers about the need to save water?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got chalk streams throughout our catchments that are dependent on the groundwater that feeds them. So for a chalk stream to flow, it needs to be connected to the groundwater that beneath it. Now, if too much water is either abstracted or we get not enough rainfall, we do see, some of the impacts of climate change. This can have a significant impact on those chalk streams. So Absolutely, every litre of water that every person consumes collectively can have a major impact on chalk streams and the wider environment. So, okay, we do have some of the highest per person water usage in the country in our region. I mean, we've got 3.5 million customers. If each of those customers use just one less litre of water per day, that's 3.5 million more litres that are in the environment. So obviously, if you start to extrapolate that and increase that number, if we can reduce that consumption even further, that water left in the environment can only have a positive benefit.
Now, we're just a few feet away. Let's walk to the edge of this River Beane chalk stream. Flow seems fairly static today, but Affinity Water has faced its critics in terms of over abstraction of water in the Aston area. Explain what you've been doing.
Well, yes, absolutely. So yeah, we are in the upper reaches of the Beane. I saw a hare run past there, which is fantastic on a day like this.
It's a glorious sight, isn't it?
It's beautiful, isn't it? And yeah, for 20 plus years we've been investigating the impact of our abstraction on the environment, and have worked alongside the Environment Agency to identify where our abstraction is unsustainable and having an impact on chalk streams, and we've taken significant action. As an example, over the last 5 years we've reduced our abstraction on the River Beane by over 16 million litres a day. That has required a huge undertaking of infrastructure, because this is the supply that Stevenage is dependent on. So we've had to take measures and huge infrastructure projects to relay mains from other sources further down in the catchments where there's less impact on chalk streams, to move that water further to ensure that Stevenage has a continual supply of water, and that the groundwater levels in the upper reaches of the River Beane can recover and return a healthy functioning chalk stream.
Now, if we look at this chalk stream, Affinity Water, in terms of its catchment policies, does an awful lot that perhaps the general public and its customers don't appreciate, in terms of ensuring that there is catchment management of the chalk streams. So that involves sometimes just ensuring that they meander, they don't flow too slowly or too quickly. This lovely kind of wind in the willows picture of what a chalk stream should be, and all those wonderful antics that went on. But then also making sure that they're not too straight, that they are indeed meandering.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, chalk streams have been under pressure for centuries. Humans have been altering the landscape for millennia, and a lot of the chalk streams have had mills built over time, and areas of the river have been straightened at that point. We've seen large scale intensification of agriculture, particularly post World War II, when we needed to feed a population after the war and recover from all the challenges that we faced then, and chalk streams have felt that pressure. I mean, as you can see here, we've got farming fields right up to the riverbank. Fortunately, we have got some buffers and some margins here, which is really good to see. But all of this impact, all of the change of hydrology of these catchments has an impact. I mean, take farming as an example. Farming has been under huge pressure, and the way that they have responded to the challenge of a growing population and the impacts of World War II to feed that population, they've had to look at innovative ways of intensifying, increasing the yields of the crops they grow. One of the challenges they've had is obviously the risk of flooding of their land. So draining water off of agricultural land has been hugely important for farmers. But all of this can have an impact on rivers and the ecology of those rivers. You can lead to kind of flood situations, which on the Beane there are issues with flooding further down on an area called the Dane End tributary. But up here it can also lead to drying out of the upper reaches. Now, it is important to note with chalk streams, they do naturally increase, decrease, dry out at certain stretches. There are natural processes with the rising and falling groundwater levels, but obviously human intervention, anthropogenic causes, can exacerbate those problems, and that's what we're trying to address through catchment management and the wider work at Affinity.
Yeah, there used to be paper mills here. They go back to the Doomsday Book, I believe. Let's trudge on a bit. But we would have seen mills along this stretch of the river.
Absolutely, and those mills were absolutely critical to the communities that thrived on them. The functions of them, a straightened chalk stream doesn't function well as a meandering chalk stream that has faster flow, slower flow. areas of calmer bits for fish spawning, etc. So a lot of the work that we've been doing, and we have got an extensive river restoration program with a number of river restoration projects along the River Beane that is trying to return some of that sinuosity to the river, some of that diversity, some of that variety that will allow ecology to recover and thrive, and hopefully, you know, create more resilient chalk streams. So in addition to understanding the impacts of our abstraction, working alongside that to have better functioning chalk stream has been a significant part of our investment. And then the catchment management element, how we actually look at land use and the way that land is managed in these catchments to be more favourable for chalk streams and ultimately better for drinking water supply, has been a key area that myself and my team have been focusing on.
So what are the pressures on our rivers? We've heard a lot about sewage. Affinity Water is water only, the largest water only company in the UK, but it's not sewage. But that's the main headline in the papers, that, you know, our rivers are being polluted day by day by the bad water companies and farmers putting slurry into the rivers. Pressures on our chalk streams.
Yeah, there are a range of pressures, and you've obviously described a couple of very well-known ones at the moment. And yes, the anthropogenic impacts and pressures on chalk streams are vast. From kind of urban pollution, so that can be sewage, as you've already mentioned. It can be runoff from roads and pollution going down surface water drains that go directly into those rivers. They can carry pollution from cars, hydrocarbons, and anything anybody drops down the drain. You can have rural pollution, so runoff from fields like the ones we're standing in today following heavy rain, so they can either run overland or through, as we have in this area, land drains. So that can include nutrients from the fertilisers that are applied, suspended solids from the soil and sediment washing into watercourses, pesticides that are applied to help protect and grow the crop. Just here, some littering of the river, the way that people interact with the river. You know, there are a whole range of these pressures.
And to our right is a field, to our left, as I say, is the slow, meandering, flowing river Beane. We can hear traffic in the background too. You're right about water and roads, but land management. Affinity Water's been at the forefront of that with events like Groundswell, hasn't it? About trying to stop nitrates from land and fertilisers seeping into the rivers.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I see, you know, we realised quite early on that to have a well-functioning chalk stream, to have resilient, clean drinking water, you have to look at the wider land use, and you have to understand how that land is managed, what issues that may be causing in the way that's managed, and then what solutions you can find with that. And you know, we have fantastic farmers in the UK. Farmers make up a significant area of the area that's managed within our catchments, and many farmers are doing a fantastic job, but they're doing it under very challenging circumstances. They have to feed an ever-growing population. They have competing challenges with climate change themselves, and you know, that the way that land is managed really is having an impact. And we've been working with a number of very progressive farmers in our area, and the Groundswell movement in particular, which I know we've had another podcast about, and they're looking at regenerative agriculture and how measures in this term regenerative agriculture can actually protect the environment, but also maintain and potentially even increase farm productivity as well. We have to work with natural processes in order to supply our vital resources, our food and our drinking water. And simple measures, like the way that you manage your soil, can be absolutely key to that. And you know, we've been looking at various cultivation practices that,
Cover crops.
Yeah, well, really the way that soil is managed. I mean, you can plough your soil, you can dig it over, you can dig out all of your weeds, you can apply fertilisers and pesticides and other inputs to it to grow a really productive crop. Or what you can do is you can reduce the tillage of your soil. You can cover it over winter with cover crops, and those cover crops can help build organic matter in the soil. They can maintain and build the structure of the soil. They can promote the biology of the soil, the things that really get soil functioning properly. And you can find over time with these practices done in the right way, in the right place that's relevant to the area. There's no one size fits all approach with this. Each business, each farmer, each water company needs to understand how their catchment functions and what the best management techniques for that. But growing cover crops has been a really good example, because we do see lots of bare soil over winter, and when you have days like this with heavy rainfall, if that soil isn't protected, if that soil doesn't have a good structure, it can break down, it can wash out into the rivers. And I mean, you know, we are looking at a fairly turbid stretch of the River Beane at the moment, which to an extent is understandable. We've got a ford just over there which is allowing kind of any runoff that flows down the road would go directly into the river. So here there are some, you know, I can see there's been some really good practices to reduce this, but that impact is still happening. So, you know, where we can identify ways that we can hold that soil on the land, where we can hold those pesticides, where we can hold those fertilizers, so they're doing their job where they need to do them, and they're not being lost into water and then ultimately contaminating drinking water. And it's vastly expensive to remove these contaminants out of drinking water. It makes much greater sense to try and prevent that happening at the source. And
so that's why catchment partnerships are so important, whether it's the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust with all the wildlife, the flora, the fauna, the trees, the otters, the butterflies. You know, you're working with a lot of different partners in a catchment.
Well, yeah, catchment partnerships and the catchment-based approach is a really fantastic initiative and a really great demonstrator of exactly what you've said, the need for partnership. The catchment partnerships in this area, hosted by the Wildlife Trust, bring various groups together, various partners, various stakeholders, all working collectively to develop a plan for how we can protect and restore these catchments. And they're absolutely fantastic, and something that Affinity really support and get behind, and we'll find any solution, any technique we can to work with those partnerships to improve that environment, particularly where water's concerned. But there's also other partnerships. It's working collectively with farmers in an area. I mean, in this area, as an example, we're working closely with a group to set up what's known as a farm cluster group. So this is a collective group of farmers with a common interest, live in a common area, share common objectives, and we'd like to work with them. We'd like to help them to understand the challenges with water, provide maybe some ideas, some incentives towards some solutions that protect water but can also help them. And I think partnership is the term that's absolutely key going forward. I think if we all tried to do something in isolation, we could end up tripping over each other, duplicating effort. But if we all work in partnership together, we all collectively find solutions, if we all work towards a common objective and a common cause, I think we'll get a much greater improvement in a much shorter period of time.
Upstream, now I'm a country girl, but I'm still not sure if I'm upstream or downstream or end of pipe solutions. This terminology, it goes hand in hand with catchment, but where am I in terms of the stream and upstream and end of pipe solutions?
Well, yeah, that term end of pipe solutions is quite a common term, and it basically describes water companies looking for treatment solutions to these problems. So actually we've got some pollution, or we've got an issue coming into our water treatment works. Let's find an engineering solution to that problem to remove that issue, which is absolutely essential, because, you know, we are required by law to supply safe and wholesome drinking water 24/7, 365 days a year. So these end of pipe solutions to manage any risks are absolutely crucial. But they are, when you're looking in catchment terms, a sticking plaster on a broken leg. And really my team and the work that the wider water resources and environment team at Affinity Water do are looking at the wider catchment. We're looking at finding those solutions that means we can reduce our dependency on treatment. It's much more economical, it makes much greater business sense to prevent that pollution happening at the source rather than trying to deal with it further downstream. So as you say here, we are upstream on the River Beane from one of our, you know, important abstractions. It's important here, if we can prevent pollution getting into the river, into groundwater here, in the longer term, that's going to reduce the level of investment we need in treatment, and it's going to create a more sustainable landscape, and it's going to protect the water environment. So really finding these catchment-based solutions are a win-win, really.